We have to begin to learn to build not only another relationship or a different relationship amongst ourselves, but a different relationship to the ecosystem itself. We can't continue this profligate consumption, not only of fossil fuels, but just of things, of plastics, and that doesn't mean, it may mean materially we're more impoverished, but it doesn't necessarily mean that spiritually we're more impoverished. So I think we have to, if we want to build sustainable infrastructures for future generations and protect ourselves from, and we're already going to bear effects from climate change, that it's unstoppable now. Even the World Bank and, you know, not particularly radical institutions can see that. But we are going to have to really start to think about living in a different way. Asking the question, who should be in power, or this kind of blind faith that if we put someone in power, it's going to save us, is politically very naive. I think that we always have to understand that power is the problem, especially now that corporate forces have taken over all of the institutions. And we have to build movements as a check on power. And that is the great failing of the left, that it's not our job to take power. All of the political openings in the United States came through mass movements that never achieved formal positions of power. Whether that was the Liberty Party that fought slavery, the suffragists, the labor movement, they didn't achieve they didn't achieve formal positions of power. They created powerful bases that defended their rights and hung fast to a moral imperative, and that we've forgotten. So, you know, it's all about who we can elect. And I have nothing against Bernie Sanders. I think, you know, I think his idea that, you know, we can put our faith in the Democratic Party has been patently exposed as a fraud, you know, with 8 years of Clinton and, you know, another, what's going to be 8 years of Obama. I just don't see how you can look at those 16 years and tell me the Democratic Party is not anything but a corporate puppet. Maybe a sane corporate puppet as opposed to, but still a corporate puppet. I mean, Obama's drilling in this country like Sarah Palin proposed. Yeah, I think we have to just forget about electoral politics on all but the local level, where we might have a fighting chance. And we have to begin to build militant mass movements that are able to carry out acts of civil disobedience. And frankly, we don't have any time left. Climate change has exposed that, you know, that window of opportunity for any kind of normalcy is rapidly diminishing. And either we stand up and overthrow these corporate forces, or they will quite literally, we will have to begin to talk about the extinction of the human species. And as a former seminarian, you know, these are what we really at this point are facing are forces of death. And if we're not willing to sacrifice, mobilize, and stand up for the forces of life, then we won't have any life. I have been in places like Bosnia during the war, where there is complete collapse. It's not just economic collapse, but it breaks down into a kind of Hobbesian universe where you have rogue militias and paramilitaries and you know, ethnic nationalists killing each other right and left. Collapse, a loss of central control, a loss of any kind of authority creates very frightening situations. And I think that America, which is often not acknowledged, is a deeply violent culture. We have a long tradition of vigilante violence in this country, tacitly supported by the state, whether that's, you know, the Ku Klux Klan or the gun thugs who broke the miners, the Pinkertons or Baldwin Felts, or, you know, there's a long list. And what I worry is that because over the last century, starting in World War I, the state has effectively destroyed our radical populist movements, which, as Howard Zinn points out, opened up American democracy. Democracy was never, the founders were terrified of direct democracy and built mechanisms in to disenfranchise all sorts of people, women, African Americans, Native Americans, those without property. We had the bloodiest labor wars of any industrialized country. Hundreds of American workers were killed, thousands were wounded. what is frightening is that in the name of anti-communism, the destruction of those movements, which has been so complete, I think, that we even don't have a language to describe what's happening to us at the moment, which is class warfare. And that's untrue of Europe. I mean, you can go to Italy or France, and they still have, residue of a communist party. You have a significant labor political party in Germany. Has left us really disempowered at a very frightening moment. So if there is a kind of breakdown, I think we cannot discount that Americans, the backlash, the fueling of what is after all a legitimate rage against the centers of power, could very well be a right-wing backlash. And I think that backlash, I think American history has amply illustrated, will come with a great deal of violence, and that frightens me. And we see it in the Christian right, in these militia movements. I mean, one of the things the Democratic Party under Clinton consciously did was essentially transform itself into the Republican Party, which forced the Republican Party to become insane. And I lived in Yugoslavia. I covered the war there. And when you have an ineffectual liberalism, which is what the Democrats have become, they speak in that traditional feel-your-pain language of liberalism and yet betray the very constituency that they purport to represent. When that happens, and this happened in Yugoslavia, it happened in Weimar, what the response is that people not only turn on these ineffectual liberals, but they turn on the supposed liberal values that they champion. And that's how you end up with fascism, totalitarianism, and I see that as a distinct possibility within the United States. So I'm with Noam in that I fear the consequences of collapse, and I think that we who and what happens with these kind of proto-fascist movements is that rather than strike back at the centers of power, which have disenfranchised them, impoverished them, they go after scapegoats. Undocumented workers, Muslims, homosexuals, intellectuals, liberals, feminists, and we already see that within the kind of within the Republican Party and within the fringe right within the United States. People forget that before the breakdown of Yugoslavia, figures like Radovan Karadzic, Franjo Tuđman, these were, they were the equivalent of the Newt Gingriches and the. They were considered crazy and insane. But the anger at the state itself saw people turn to these fringe characters, and I think that in the same way that you saw with the breakdown of Weimar, turning to the fringe characters in the Nazi Party. So I'm worried. I'm worried because I think that we've been so effectively eviscerated. And now we are watching the rise of the security and surveillance state, the crushing of the Occupy movement, which, had internal problems. I was very involved in Zuccotti, but was a nonviolent movement. And if you thwart the possibility for nonviolent resistance, history has shown eventually you will get violence. And once that kind of violence erupts, it legitimizes state terror. I mean, in a way, states sort of feed off of that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, collapse is not something that I look forward to, given the social, cultural, and political configurations of the United States. I think in particular, Canada is a different case. My wife's Canadian. But within America, it could be really ugly.